presence gathers at the edge of the room, a quiet weight rising whenever attention turns. Breath folds inward, as if shrinking might erase the shape of a body. A pulse lifts toward the throat, holding back something that once tried to reach the world and learned to retreat instead. The air settles in a hush, not heavy, but expectant, as though a forgotten memory has begun to stir just beneath the skin. A faint ache moves along the sternum, spreading slowly, carrying with it a sensation older than thought, a reminder of moments when openness felt too bright, too sudden, too near. The body leans ever so slightly inward, curving around its own center, as if the simple act of being perceived could alter the rhythm of breath. At a modest table near a high window, someone waits quietly. A name may be called soon, yet the body holds distance. Soft conversation drifts through the space in gentle waves. Lightness moves from person to person with quiet ease. But around the figure at the table, something shifts inward, forming a subtle climate shaped by vigilance and habit. A wish appears to remain just beyond the circle of noticing. Hands fold together with practiced calm and quiet precision. The gaze lowers toward the floor in a familiar soft gesture, not from sorrow, but from a long-learned way of easing presence, a way of staying near while remaining slightly out of view. Many years earlier, on an unremarkable afternoon, something rose. A tender truth surfaced, seeking expression without demand. It met no cruelty, only a silence unprepared to receive it fully. The moment paused, leaving the heart suspended in the stillness. The body learned from that moment and began to draw back. It learned to measure each impulse before it reached the world. No rebellion formed, only a quiet architecture of protection, a structure built slowly, the way roots form beneath the soil. Unseen, persistent, shaping the direction of every new growth. Through time, the structure held, steady and almost beautiful. A life formed gently around it, careful in its unfolding. Yet within that life, a small echo remained, soft but enduring. It whispered of the cost once carried in stepping forward, a cost the heart still remembers in its quiet inner chambers. The body remembers first exposures in quiet, steady ways, moments when attention felt too sharp against soft foundations, a question arriving suddenly, tilting the room toward a small voice, a voice not yet anchored, still finding its place in the world. Even long after childhood dissolves into distance, the imprint stays. A narrowing across the ribs moves softly through the breath. The shoulders lift slightly, preparing for an unseen demand. Warmth rises beneath the throat, gathering without haste, as if the body readies a sound that may not land safely. The memory does not live as story or clear sequence. It lives as atmosphere, as a faint tension in the muscles. It appears as hesitation arriving before any words form. The body shields itself because it has learned the cost of exposure. There is a gentle erosion shaped by early misinterpretations, a soft offering misunderstood in a moment of uncertainty, a sincerity met with confusion that left no clear trace, a quiet excitement brushed aside without intention or harm. None of it harsh, none of it meant to carve meaning. Yet the impact settles deeply where language cannot reach. Something learns that visibility reshapes the inner contours. It learns that being seen can bend intention out of alignment, so the self drifts a small step behind each unfolding moment, present yet softened around the edges of experience, engaged but faint in the quiet borderlands of perception. The world background grows slightly blurred, like a distant painting, recognizable, but never fully entered from within. Another layer forms when identity is still tender and unsettled, a self newly woven, fragile in its early architecture, called into visibility before its structure has solidified. The instinct to withdraw arises without resistance or fear. It appears as respect for the unfinished nature within. A retreat forms slowly, returning the self to interior rooms untouched by shaping gazes or external interpretation. This withdrawal builds its own quiet grace over time, a refugee holding what has not yet learned to meet the world, a region within the self where depth grows in silence, a space where becoming moves without interruption. Deep beneath the visible layers, an emotional thread continues. Yet formed in the instant, a true impulse met a subtle consequence, a glance that cooled without meaning to shift the moment, a pause that lingered just long enough to alter the air, a change in atmosphere small enough to dismiss, yet felt deeply. The thread remains woven through the body's sense of timing. It guides movements toward familiar corridors of safety, toward subdued expression and quieter forms of presence. Even as adulthood wraps strength around old tenderness, the thread hums softly with remembered impressions. It reminds the heart of how exposure once trembled at its edges, and how naturally the body learned to fold itself inward again. A person sits among acquaintances while conversation drifts lightly. A thought begins to rise within, gentle and measured and whole. But as it nears the surface, a tremor moves through the chest. Speech hesitates, the moment softens and the thought retreats. Silence returns to its familiar seat beside them with quiet ease. Another person receives a kind remark, a recognition of something true. Warmth gathers within, ready to open, ready to deepen. Yet the body curves subtly inward to guard a tender place. The compliment hovers on the surface, unable to settle fully. It waits at the edge of the deeper folds of the heart. The third person tends a private project in patient creation. The work deepens slowly, shaped by devotion and quiet focus. When sharing becomes possible, a mist rises within. Not refusal, not resistance, only the instinct to protect what has grown safely in solitude over time. Two currents move continuously within the interior landscape, the longing to be known and the desire to remain unaltered. They do not struggle, they weave a subtle rhythm together, a rhythm shaping the quiet architecture of the self. Visibility opens pathways toward closeness and recognition, yet closeness stirs memories of misalignment and overwhelm. To step forward is to offer a version of the self to the world. To remain unseen preserves coherence, but mutes expression. A quiet negotiation forms at the threshold between these states. No flaw lives here, only a contract written in stillness. The contract formed when safety required calm withdrawal. Yet even within that contract, change moves gently. Openings appear the way winter softens into spring, not by force, but by the quiet return of warmth. In moments of rising intensity, breath may drift lower. Warmth may gather in the hands as truth nears the surface. The body holds its place in the world with quiet steadiness. Belonging settles through subtle grounding and soft awareness. Somewhere within the layered quiet of the chest, a small light endures. Not seeking, not pushing, simply present within its own rhythm. It holds the shape of a self that once stepped back with care, a self that protected its tenderness without vanishing from view. The world is wide enough for guarded corners and slow unfolding. Nothing presses, nothing demands, nothing forces pace. The inner landscape breathes in its own evolving rhythm, opening softly, finding space, and remembering presence again.